They say a wedding day reveals who truly stands beside you. Mine revealed who was willing to watch me fall. I didn't make a scene. I simply switched 2 glasses and waited for the truth to rise with the champagne bubbles. The morning of my wedding smelled like white roses and fresh linen, soft, innocent, almost naive. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the bridal suite, turning the dust in the air into drifting gold. My friends fluttered around me like bright birds, adjusting my veil, reapplying gloss, whispering reassurances that trembled with excitement. I should have felt weightless. Instead, I felt watched. It wasn't paranoia. It was a subtle tightening in my chest, like the faintest thread pulling somewhere behind me. Every time I laughed, the sound felt a fraction too loud, as if someone might be measuring it. And then I saw her. My mother-in-law stood near the entrance of the reception hall long before guests were invited inside. Perfect posture, pale blue suit, pearls that caught the light but never gave it back. She wasn't smiling. She was observing, like someone inspecting a property before signing papers. A wedding planner hurried past with a clipboard, whispering something about the doctor who had arrived early because he had another shift later. The word doctor floated past me like an omen. I didn't know why it mattered yet, but I remembered it. The ceremony itself was flawless. My fiancé, my soon-to-be husband, looked at me like I was the only thing anchored in his universe. When he squeezed my hands at the altar, warmth flooded through me, pushing away that tight thread of unease. For a moment, I believed everything would be fine. The reception hall shimmered with candlelight. Crystal glasses waited in neat rows, each one reflecting tiny flames like captured stars. A quartet played something soft and classical near the terrace doors. Laughter rippled across tables dressed in ivory and silver. I stepped aside briefly to breathe. The dress was heavier than I'd imagined. Not uncomfortable. Just grounding. Real. That's when I saw it. My mother-in-law approached the table where the champagne was being prepared for the wedding toast. She moved with casual familiarity, brushing past a server who had turned to greet another guest. Her hand slipped into her clutch, quick, precise, almost elegant. And then she tilted something into a glass. Not hers. Mine. It was small, a movement so subtle most people would never notice. But I noticed. Maybe because I'd been watching her all day. Maybe because something in me had already been bracing for impact. The liquid didn't change color. It dissolved like a secret sinking to the bottom of a lake. My pulse roared in my ears. I didn't confront her. I didn't gasp. I didn't call for help. Instead, I smiled. Slowly, calmly, I walked toward the table as if admiring the floral arrangement. My heels clicked against marble, steady, unhurried. I reached for the glass positioned where I knew I'd be standing, and then, with the smallest turn of my wrist, I switched it with the one beside it. It felt like moving a chess piece. She looked up. Our eyes met. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not guilt, calculation. She was trying to understand whether I had seen. I lifted the untouched glass and gave her a polite nod. Her lips curved into a thin smile, the kind people use in photographs they don't intend to keep. Guests began taking their seats. The MC announced that the mother of the groom would begin the wedding toast shortly. Applause followed, warm, trusting, unaware. Across the room, I noticed the doctor again. He stood near the back, speaking quietly with someone from my husband's family. He looked slightly out of place in a formal suit, like a man accustomed to hospital corridors and fluorescent lights. His gaze drifted toward the champagne table, toward the glasses. Something tightened in my stomach. My mother-in-law lifted the switched glass and moved toward the center of the room. The candles trembled as if sensing a shift in air pressure. The quartet's music faded. Silence gathered itself politely. She raised the glass. "Family?" she began, her voice smooth as polished marble. "Today we celebrate love, trust, and the joining of two lives." Trust! The word echoed strangely. She hadn't taken a sip yet. Her eyes flicked to mine again, testing, measuring. I held her gaze, calm, almost serene. My hands were folded loosely in front of me, lace sleeves brushing against my skin like a quiet reminder. Breathe. The doctor stepped slightly forward, though no one seemed to notice, and suddenly I realized something terrifying. Maybe the drink wasn't meant to harm me physically. Maybe it was meant to humiliate me, to make me dizzy, slur my words, collapse during the first dance, become the unstable bride, the fragile outsider who couldn't handle the pressure. Reputation can be shattered faster than glass. She tilted the champagne. The rim touched her lips. The room held its breath. "If you think that was the worst moment of my wedding day, you haven't heard what happened next." The first sip barely touched her tongue before the room shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first, no crashing glass, no cinematic gasp, just a pause, too long to be graceful. Her eyes blinked twice, slowly, like someone adjusting to sudden light. The champagne flute trembled between her fingers. She swallowed. A murmur passed through the guests, subtle as wind moving through silk curtains. Then she smiled, too widely. "My dear son," she continued, voice still smooth, but a fraction delayed, like a recording slightly out of sync. "You have chosen a very spirited woman." A few guests chuckled politely. I didn't. Her posture faltered, not visibly enough for most to register, but I saw it. Her shoulders dipped a fraction. She shifted her weight, recalculating her balance. The pearls at her throat caught the candlelight, trembling against her skin. The doctor stepped forward. Not hurried, not alarmed, just precise. "Excuse me," he said calmly, voice carrying in the sudden hush. "Who served these drinks?" The question sliced through the atmosphere like clean glass. Every head turned. The wedding planner froze mid-step. A server near the champagne table stiffened. My husband looked from his mother to me, confusion spreading across his face like ink in water. My mother-in-law blinked again, slower now. "I'm perfectly fine," she insisted, though her words stretched thin at the edges. "Just a touch emotional." The doctor didn't argue. He stepped closer, assessing her pupils with the quiet authority of someone used to reading what others miss. "Ma'am," he said gently, "did you consume anything unusual?" The irony was so sharp it almost made me dizzy. She looked at him, then at me, and in that moment I saw it. Fear, not of illness, of exposure. "I only had champagne," she replied. My heart hammered so loudly I thought the room might hear it. This was the moment where everything could spiral. Accusations, chaos, ruined celebration, a bride accused of sabotage at her own wedding. But I stayed still. The doctor turned to the table and picked up the second glass, the one I now held. He examined it against the light. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "There's residue," he said quietly. "This should be tested." Gasps bloomed like sudden fireworks. My husband stepped forward, protective instinct igniting. "Tested? For what?" The doctor didn't dramatize it. He didn't speculate. He simply said, "There appears to be a dissolvable sedative, mild, but enough to cause disorientation." Silence. Thick, heavy. My mother-in-law's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Her knuckles whitened beneath the pearls. "That's absurd," she snapped, composure cracking at the edges. "Are you suggesting someone tried to drug me at my son's wedding?" Her voice rose, too quickly. The guests began whispering. Eyes darted from her to the servers, to me, to the doctor. And then she made her mistake. She turned toward me and said, a little too sharply, "You were near the table, weren't you?" The implication hung in the air like smoke. I felt anger surge, hot, blinding, but I swallowed it. This wasn't about shouting. It wasn't about revenge. It was about precision. "Yes," I answered evenly. "I was." A ripple of tension. "And?" she pressed. "And I switched the glasses." The room inhaled as one. My husband stared at me, not angry, shocked, searching. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because I saw your mother slip something into mine." But I didn't say it like that. "I saw someone touch the glass that was meant for me," I said carefully. "I wasn't sure what it was. I didn't want to make a scene, so I switched them." The doctor nodded slowly. That was wise. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. "You're accusing me?" she whispered, but the confidence was gone. The marble had cracked. "I'm not accusing anyone," I replied. My voice didn't tremble. "I'm stating what I saw." The doctor addressed the room calmly. "No one is being accused, but this substance didn't appear on its own." My husband turned to his mother. "Mom, did you touch her glass?" She opened her mouth, closed it, for a second too long. "I was adjusting the placement," she said finally. "The table looked uneven. Even the candles seemed skeptical." The wedding planner stepped forward, flustered. "We have everything recorded for setup. Security cameras monitor the bar area." There it was, not drama, not screaming, documentation. My mother-in-law's composure collapsed in tiny fractures. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound came brittle. "This is ridiculous. You're ruining the celebration over nothing." Nothing. A sedative in the bride's glass. My husband's jaw tightened. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't accusing. He was thinking. And that was worse for her. The doctor gently took the glass from her hand. "We'll run a quick confirmation. If it's harmless, we continue. If not, we address it properly." Properly. That word settled like a verdict waiting to be written. Guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one left. Curiosity had rooted them to their seats. My mother-in-law straightened her spine, clinging to dignity like a lifeline. "I will not be treated like a criminal." "No one is treating you like anything," I said softly. "The truth will." And in that instant, I understood something with startling clarity. This was never about a drink. It was about control, about rewriting the narrative of who I was in this family before I had the chance to define it myself. She wanted the fragile bride, the unstable one, the girl who couldn't handle tradition. Instead, she stood in front of her own reflection. The doctor stepped aside to make a call. The room buzzed like electricity building before a storm. If you think she walked away from that moment untouched, you're underestimating what quiet consequences can do. If you were in her place, would you have switched the glasses or confronted her immediately? Tell me what you would have done. The music never resumed, not fully. It lingered somewhere in the background, hesitant, like a pianist unsure whether to continue after someone has dropped a glass. Conversations fractured into quiet clusters. The air that had once shimmered with celebration now carried something sharper. Awareness. My mother-in-law sat down. Not dramatically. Not in defeat. She lowered herself into her chair with deliberate control, smoothing the fabric of her suit as if composure could be pressed back into place with steady hands. But her fingers betrayed her. They kept adjusting the pearls at her throat. Across the hall, my husband stood motionless, processing. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at her, and that somehow mattered more. The doctor returned after a brief consultation call. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform. He simply approached our table and spoke with quiet authority. "The substance appears to be a mild benzodiazepine derivative," he said evenly. "Non-lethal. often prescribed for anxiety. In small doses, it causes dizziness, delayed speech, impaired coordination. A chill ran through the room. Impaired coordination. I imagined myself stumbling during the first dance, slurring vows during the toast, becoming a whispered story retold at every holiday dinner. She's always been sensitive. The narrative had already been prepared. My husband exhaled slowly. How did it get there? The doctor glanced at the glass still resting on a tray, now treated like evidence rather than celebration. That's not accidental contamination. A murmur spread like ink in water. My mother-in-law lifted her chin. Are we truly turning my son's wedding into a courtroom? No one answered. That silence said more than outrage ever could. The wedding planner approached discreetly. Security footage is being reviewed, she said softly. For everyone's peace of mind. Peace of mind. What an elegant phrase for unraveling truth. I felt something unexpected rising inside me. Not anger, not triumph, sadness. Because beneath the pearls and posture, beneath the carefully constructed elegance, stood a woman who had believed control was the only way to secure her place. And now, control was slipping. She looked at me again. This time there was no calculation, only pleading. Why would you do this? She asked, voice tight but low enough to keep from becoming a spectacle. I didn't, I replied calmly. I protected myself. Her lips parted slightly, but no defense came. My husband finally turned toward me. His eyes searched mine, not accusing, not suspicious, just trying to understand the woman he had married minutes ago. You saw her? He asked quietly. Yes. And you were certain? I was certain enough not to drink it. The weight of that answer settled between them. Not dramatic, not hysterical, just precise. The doctor cleared his throat gently. Given the circumstances, I recommend we document this properly. For everyone's protection. Protection. That word struck deeper than anything else. My mother-in-law's shoulders stiffened. Document? A report, he clarified. Standard procedure when an unidentified substance is involved. The word report changed the temperature of the room, because a report becomes a record becomes a fact, and facts don't bend to family pressure. Her composure cracked, not outwardly, but in the way her breathing shortened. The illusion of social dominance began dissolving faster than whatever she had poured into that glass. This is unnecessary, she said sharply. You're overreacting. My husband's voice, when it came, was steady. If it's nothing, then documentation protects you too. There it was, not betrayal, not blind loyalty, fairness, and fairness is a quiet blade. The security footage arrived on a tablet, discreet but undeniable. The wedding planner hesitated only a moment before handing it to my husband. He watched, once, twice, his jaw tightened. He handed it to the doctor, then to me. There she was, clear as daylight, her hand slipping into her clutch, the subtle tilt of her wrist, the precise angle over my glass. No dramatic villainy, just intent. The room didn't need a projector, it didn't need amplification. The truth had already spread through posture, through breath, through the sudden distance guests instinctively created around her table. My mother-in-law closed her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them, the authority was gone. I was trying to prevent a scene, she whispered. The irony almost broke me. A scene? My husband asked, disbelief threading through his voice. She's emotional, she insisted weakly. Big events overwhelm her. I thought, if she were calmer. I felt the last thread of sympathy snap. You thought drugging me was kindness? I asked softly. The question wasn't loud, but it echoed. The doctor spoke carefully. Regardless of intention, this constitutes tampering. Tampering! Such a clinical word for betrayal. My husband stepped back as if needing space to see her clearly. "Mom," he said quietly, "you crossed a line." There was no shouting, no dramatic accusations, just disappointment, measured and unmistakable. And disappointment, I would learn, weighs more than anger. Guests began returning to their conversations, but nothing was the same. The glow of the evening had shifted from fairy tale to revelation. My mother-in-law sat very still. The pearls no longer gleamed. They looked heavy. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I didn't claim victory. I simply stood beside my husband, steady. Because this wasn't revenge. It was record. And records, unlike rumors, endure. The reception didn't end. That surprised everyone. There was a quiet pause, like a breath drawn before a difficult conversation. But then the music resumed, softer, slower, as if the orchestra understood instinctively that something had shifted and chose grace over spectacle. Guests returned to their seats, though not quite as carefree as before. Laughter came back in cautious ripples. Conversations resumed, but voices lowered, glances sharper. Truth has a way of rearranging a room. My mother-in-law remained seated at the far end of the main table, alone. No one instructed guests to move away from her. No dramatic exile occurred. But chairs shifted subtly. Bodies angled slightly elsewhere. Proximity, once automatic, became selective. Social gravity had changed. The doctor spoke privately with the wedding planner near the bar. I caught fragments. Incident report. Non-lethal. Documentation filed. Calm, professional language that carried more weight than shouting ever could. My husband turned to me. "I need to ask you something," he said gently. We stepped toward the terrace doors, where the evening air drifted in cool and fragrant with gardenias. Outside, fairy lights trembled in the breeze, casting gold reflections over polished stone. "Did you think I wouldn't believe you?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "I didn't know what you'd believe," I admitted. "I just knew I couldn't risk becoming the unstable bride." He winced slightly at that word. "She's done this before, hasn't she?" he asked quietly. Not with drinks, with narratives, with subtle comments about my fragility, about how I take things personally, about how stressful events can overwhelm me, always delivered with concerned smiles. "She's tried to define me before I could define myself," I said. He exhaled slowly, processing more than just tonight. "I should have seen it." "That's not your burden," I replied. We both saw it now. The music swelled behind us. Someone had started the first dance without announcement, a symbolic choice, movement instead of paralysis. Inside, I saw my mother-in-law stand abruptly and approach the doctor. Her posture was rigid again, but this time it looked forced, like a mask applied too late. "I want to see that footage," she demanded, though her voice stayed controlled. "You've seen it," he replied calmly. "The couple has seen it." She glanced around and noticed guests avoiding her gaze, whispering, not loudly, but enough. Reputation doesn't collapse in explosions. It erodes, grain by grain. The wedding planner approached her discreetly. "For legal clarity, a copy of the report will be retained by the venue," she explained. Standard protocol. Legal clarity. The phrase settled like a seal pressed into wax. My mother-in-law's lips tightened. "You're making this far bigger than necessary," she said. "No," the doctor responded evenly. "It became necessary the moment it happened." That sentence landed harder than anything else tonight. Back on the dance floor, my husband extended his hand to me. "May I?" he asked, as if asking again. I placed my hand in his, The music wrapped around us, slow, deliberate, grounding. His hand rested at my waist, steady. My dress brushed against the floor like a soft tide, rhythm replacing tension. And yet, even while dancing, I felt it, eyes watching, not accusing, witnessing. My mother-in-law had built her influence over years. Carefully curated dinners, polished appearances, subtle authority in family decisions. She wasn't loud, she was strategic. Tonight, that strategy had cracked in front of everyone. She didn't shout, she didn't deny further. She simply gathered her clutch, adjusted her pearls once more, and approached us on the dance floor. Guests quieted instinctively. "I would like a word," she said, not to me, to her son. He didn't let go of my hand. "We'll talk," he replied, "but not here." A flicker of something passed over her face. Shock, perhaps, that she no longer commanded immediate obedience. "Family matters should remain private," she pressed. "They will," he said calmly. "Documented, but private." Documented. The word echoed again, softer but sharper. She realized then that control had shifted, not to me, not to him, to facts. Without another word, she stepped back, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked smaller, not physically, but structurally, like a cathedral whose foundation has been quietly inspected and found flawed. The rest of the evening unfolded without further incident. The cake was cut, toasts resumed, shorter, gentler. Laughter returned, cautiously at first, then genuinely. But something had permanently changed, not the wedding, the hierarchy. When my mother-in-law finally left early, citing a headache, no one stopped her. The doors closed behind her softly, and the silence that followed wasn't tension. It was release. 3 weeks later, the roses from the wedding had long since wilted, but the consequences had not. They bloomed differently, quietly. The official report from the venue arrived first. Neutral language, clinical precision, timestamps, observations, confirmation of a sedative consistent with anti-anxiety medication not prescribed to me. The document didn't accuse, it didn't dramatize, it recorded. And records do what whispers cannot. They endure scrutiny. My mother-in-law attempted subtle damage control in the days following the wedding. Carefully worded messages to extended relatives, soft reframing, a misunderstanding, overprotective instinct, concern taken out of context. But the footage existed, the doctor's written statement existed, the venue's retained copy existed. Facts had become architecture. My husband requested a private meeting with her at a family attorney's office, not a confrontation, not a spectacle. Just a conversation with a legal witness present. I wasn't there. That part mattered to him. This was between a son and his mother. When he returned home that evening, his expression was resolute. "She admitted she brought the medication," he said quietly. "She claims she only intended to take the edge off." The phrase felt almost absurd now. "She didn't deny it?" I asked. "No." The admission wasn't loud, it wasn't theatrical, it was documented in writing, signed, dated, an acknowledgement that she had tampered with a drink without consent. Not for revenge, for clarity. Our attorney advised filing a formal notice, not pressing criminal charges, but establishing legal boundaries. A cease and desist regarding defamation. A documented restriction against interference in our private events or reputation. Measured, proportional, permanent. My mother-in-law's social circle learned of the incident report before she could rewrite it fully, not through gossip, through controlled transparency. When one relative asked my husband what had happened, he didn't dramatize. He simply said, "There was a documented issue involving tampering. It's been addressed legally. Addressed legally. No embellishment, no humiliation, but no protection from truth either. Invitations began arriving differently after that. We were invited as a couple. Decisions were discussed with us, not around us. Family gatherings shifted tone. Politeness remained, but authority recalibrated. Reputation doesn't collapse loudly. It adjusts. My mother-in-law requested a meeting with me 2 months later. We met in a quiet cafe near the courthouse district. Neutral ground, no chandeliers, no pearls reflecting candlelight, just daylight and plain wooden tables. She looked smaller without the armor. "I misjudged you," she said finally. There was no apology at first, just acknowledgement. "I believed you were fragile," she continued. "I thought if you faltered publicly, my son would reconsider." The honesty was surgical. "And now?" I asked. "Now I see that you're far steadier than I anticipated." It wasn't warmth, but it was recognition. "I never wanted to fight you," I said calmly. "I only wanted to be respected." Silence stretched between us, not hostile, just real. "I won't interfere again," she said. "You have my word." This time, it wasn't pearls holding her posture upright. It was consequence. We didn't embrace. There were no dramatic reconciliations. Healing, if it happens, will be gradual. Earned, but something fundamental had shifted. At the next family gathering, she introduced me differently. "This is my daughter-in-law," she said, voice steady. "She's stronger than she looks." There was no irony in it, no edge, just fact. And sometimes that is the quietest form of victory. Not revenge, not humiliation, not collapse. Just a line drawn, legally, calmly, permanently. The wedding day that could have become my public unraveling instead became the moment I anchored myself in truth. And every time someone raises a glass near me now, I don't feel fear. I feel clarity. Because trust, once tested, either shatters or becomes unbreakable